这脸上怎么都有横肉了？哎，行吧，开始学。上个星期可能有点压力过大，哎呀，压力过大导致了我这个心脏有巨大问题，心悸，差点死了。然后昨天我用了我的拔罐，还有这个东西，还有我花几块钱买的这本书《人体经络穴位按摩大全》，我昨天翻这个内关穴、大陵穴，我自己按摩了一下，哎，真的很有效，真的很有效。昨天下午当时摁完，我就感觉就是心不那么乱跳了，乱跳的那么狠了。昨天晚上我又睡了一觉，一觉到天亮，连梦都没有，10个小时，11点睡到9点多，哎呀，太不容易了。我前天晚上基本上就没睡觉，可能到8点，我11点躺到8点，然后睡了可能有1个小时。它就是实际上我觉得昨天下午我看了医学的东西，实际上这个医学真的我觉得挺简单的。假如说你有这个经验的话，当然不是说所有的病你都得有一次经验，有的病你可能有一次经验可能去球了，但是有一些病像心脏病这种东西，我觉得真的不是那么可怕。还有糖尿病，我觉得我现在糖尿病和心脏病可能都占一点，高血压我也有一点。我记得上次去这个教师资格考试的时候，他给我检验，好像我的血压高的时候好像都过130了。我看节目上应该是台湾的节目，但具体是哪儿的数据我忘了，可能是联合国给的，然后是世卫吧，不是联合国，世卫给的标准好像是现在更新了一下，就是说到130，好像超过120吧还是多少？超过120就已经是高血压了，这叫高血压1期。如果你超过130的话，现在就直接说你是高血压2期了，所以说我就有点危险了。因为我那去测的时候，主要我那次碰见那傻逼医生，他妈搞得我他妈心态我他妈光想日他妈，所以妈弄成这样的话，我肯定是血压可能会稍微高一点，但是我知道肯定是有点问题。而且昨天我看节目上不能那个顿顿饱，我他妈上大学养成这个烂习惯，觉得自己哎呀，你看我是北方汉子，妈的，就看不起那些吃饭，那细品味那行，对吧？顿顿饱，还觉得自己很威武，很勇猛，结果发现他妈太傻逼了，自己吃出问题了，所以以后都不能坚决要控制一下。这顶帽子是1个月前买的，1个月后到了，因为春节，居然还有几顶没发少了。行吧，不逼逼啊，我们开始看这个5507这个。哎，我真的我太难了，这东西我根本都听不懂。他如果完全说英文的话，我真的我都听不懂。那个统计课那个印度老师说了啥？我靠，就跟中国一样，念一遍 PPT 完事儿了。关键他念的 PPT 我还不懂，哎，妈服了我。
Transcripts of the maydays reveal that no indication was given to the emergency services of how the rig was re-abandoned. Worse still, no one told the memory board what to do. From what training they had received, the men were supposed to muster at their lifeboat stations and await instructions over the Channel. But the fire stopped them from reaching the boats, so they assembled in a fireproofed accommodation block to await evacuation by helicopter. Over 100 men gathered in the galley area, just beneath the helideck. But the wind was blowing smoke and flames over the helideck, making landing impossible. given no further instructions other than to wait. Although the accommodation block was gradually filling with smoke, at no point was there an organized attempt to lead them to safety. When the fire deluge system failed to start, two men bravely attempted to reach the vital diesel pumps that had been switched to manual. They never made it, and were never seen again. The emergency shutdown had stopped oil production on pipeline, yet the oil fire continued to rage. It would eventually have burnt itself out, had it not been for the actions of adjoining rigs. Piper Alpha was at the center of a network of rigs. Along with Piper, the Tartan and Claymore platforms pumped oil into the main onshore oil line. This pumping caused back pressure in Piper's oil line. It was forcing oil out of the ruptured pipes, fueling the fire on Piper. To prevent this backflow of oil, it was vital that the two other rigs stopped pumping immediately. 22 miles away, Claymore heard the first mayday. Communications between the platforms had been knocked out in the explosion, yet the manager of Claymore continued to pump oil, believing that the situation was most likely under control.
Stand by, vessel Nautica.
The manager tried to contact Occidental's control center on shore, meanwhile continuing oil production. It sounds like an oil pipe. Look, if it's a big one, pipe of lines are going to fail. I think we should shut down.
Is Piper shut down?
Yeah, we have.
What's the pressure on the line?
Yeah, it's holding up all right.
Don't shut down.
Meanwhile, the Tartan rig, only 12 miles away, in spite of hearing the maydays and seeing flames on the horizon, also continued to pump oil. The manager had received approval for this decision from the superior in Aberdeen.
There's always a potential conflict between production and safety. The revenue on a daily basis of an offshore platform can be very considerable indeed. When you shut a platform down, it's a difficult matter to restart it. It may take you 2 or 3 days to get back up to full, proper production. So it's not a decision you lightly take. Unless you give an OIM the authority to take a difficult decision in that situation without fear of subsequently being blamed, then people will delay, they will be inhibited, they will wait too long, and things can get much worse.
The oil spewing from the shattered pipes on Piper heated up something far more hazardous. There were huge gas lines also coming in from the adjoining rigs. These meter-wide pipes ran for miles and contained thousands of tons of highly pressurized flammable gas. The dangers were well known to Occidental's management. They had commissioned a report 2 years earlier which warned, these pipelines, especially the gas pipelines, would take hours to depressurize because of their capacity. This could result in a high-pressure gas fire on the cellar deck that would be virtually impossible to fight. Yet nothing had been done either to protect or strengthen the pipelines. At 10:20, the Tartan gas pipeline melted and burst. Three tons of gas were coming out of the ruptured pipe every second, 1.5 times the entire UK gas consumption in an area just 75 meters square. It even this did not seal the fate of those on board. Such was the efficiency of the fire dragging on the accommodation block that most of the men were still alive, although increasingly overcome by smoke. Some took matters into their own hands, found their way down through the accommodation block, and although they'd been told that it would mean certain death, made the 10-story jump into the sea. The second explosion knocked out the telephone link between Claymore and Occidental's onshore control center.
Let's go now. Then we shut down now. And I need to talk to the emergency center. Try and get on the satellite system. We should shut down. This is Claymore. Can you read? Over. You can see the bloody fire from here. We really should shut down right now. Their fire pumps should be coping. I'm still trying to reach the center. Look, they're just homeless. There's men in the water. They've abandoned the bloody unit. What more do you want? ECC, do you read? This is Claymore. Over.
Although he repeatedly announced to shut down, the operator deferred to the seniority of his manager, and the oil continued to flow.
Okay. So, yeah, have a go. Second time we won't take quite as long as it. This time I think it'll be quite consistent with it. I want to go thinking about what are the additional design issues that came up, if there were any. Were there any other indicators of management systems that were poorly designed? Any more insights into cult, what we now describe as cult?
Squeeze me, please.
Cultural issues, and what were some of the aggravating events, the things that made things worse than they could otherwise have been. Okay? Discuss amongst yourselves, make as much noise as you like. some of what I would call the aggravating events. What are some of the things that happen that make these worse?
You always talk to the manager.
Right? Yeah. Isn't that an extraordinary statistic? What, 3 tons of, I don't remember who's nominated a second. Yeah. Yeah, that's just mind-boggling, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the back pressure on the main oil line, absolutely. They didn't shut off. Yep. Yep. That's more of a management system. No, the back.
马上吃，
procedures. Well, there might have been a back procedures.
现在吃。
No, the back procedures not clear. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. What are the chances, huh? Yeah, so you couldn't use it? Excellent. Yeah, so Claymore not getting go ahead, yeah. Had to shut down. Yep. Yeah, button didn't respond. Anything else? Your list? Yeah, nice question. Successful. Yeah.
这他妈写的是个英文字儿，我操！
Yep, no, I think there's there was one other big
看不懂。
thing, the 5 months didn't start, right? Okay, so we've got a bunch of things that happened. So now we can say, were those things that happened, were they design related, were they culturally related, or were they related to an absence of poor procedures? So let's start the, what would you think were the major design issues here? Again? Yeah, so no reliable emergency comm system. Yep. Definitely a design issue. Yep. Yeah. Flow line design. No isolation. Accessibility or not. Yep. Yeah, so why is that a design issue? Okay. Okay. Design allowing smoking, I just abbreviate that now. Yep. Okay, good point. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Great. So you can start to see pretty quickly, you can start to see that once you start to have all these events, you get a good list of the events, you can start analyzing those events in terms of what was the cause, what we would say the 5 whys. Why? So generally, what happens in a major accident, this particular list of events will be absolutely specific to the accident. The immediate cause will be absolutely specific to the accident, but the things that happen that cause the cause, they will be general more general to a wider range of things, and they tend to be to do with the design, management system, and cultural aspects. Okay, were there any management system issues apart from the lack of a evacuation procedure and the fact that it was gone? Yeah, huge. The manager did not as what we call stop work authority. This is a huge thing. Yeah. So is that a management system property problem? Okay. Emergency response, team and processes. Yep. So I'll just put that under location. I'm thinking myself. Did you have something? Okay, that's great. Somebody else had their hand up. Yes. Right. So this is some behaviour from Tartan and Claymore. Yeah. Does that sort of capture it? Yeah. Just before we go to you, this one and then the guy at the back and then here. Yeah. 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 Lack of authority on the risk. I think is how we would capture that. It's a huge issue. Sorry, somebody at the back had their hand up earlier on. Did they capture you? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Alternate master. This gives it some context. Sorry, and the gentleman in the engineers Australia t-shirt. Yes, that would be you. Did you have your hand up? Are we okay? Okay. So, right, two more. Thank you. Cost focused culture, which is not a bad thing. Everybody needs a cost culture focus because the world runs on money, but it can't override safety. Okay, there's somebody up the back. Yeah. Blame culture. Fantastic words over safety culture. That's great. I think that's probably something. Oh, right, last one. Yeah, no action on the pipe location design review. Yeah, that's what I mean by this lack of authority. Yeah, so I think that's about yeah, he couldn't because he didn't have the authority. It's a cultural. He didn't feel he had the authority. So that I think that's the important bit here is about very hierarchical structures. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we don't know the reason for that, but I think I just put that here, only one attempt. Yeah, that's an important fact in there. Okay, look, so the other thing, this is all really good, and I think you're getting a much.
Fuck, I got nothing. You write down, could you please write properly? 唉，青城大门开。
Much richer list. I should say a couple of things. Now, this exercise, don't agonize about where on the page I happen to have written something. The point here is to capture the information, whether it sits in culture or management system, often those two things are connected. Don't agonize over where it sits. The important thing is to have identified it as an issue so that it can be elevated, discussed, and understood. So don't beat yourself up if you put things in slightly the wrong columns. What I want you to have done is got as many of these as possible onto your page, wherever they sit. That's the most important thing is to be able to do that. And then you can argue about where it goes, and that's well and good. For a minute, my computer keeps logging me out here. So for me, this is a really useful exercise because what I want you, it kind of indicates to me this sort of scrutiny and this analysis I want you to start doing. When you read reports or see case studies or hear news, read a clip that I've posted from the newspaper about, the latest 777 dropping an engine out of the sky as it flies over Wisconsin. I want you to stop, read that and go, God, I wonder what the sequence of events was there. I wonder what we know about the culture at Boeing. What their management system practices are. How could that have happened? I want you to start thinking about it in terms of these things. Who made the engine? Pratt and Whitney. What about their role in all of this? So if we just start analysing and being critical analysis of something. So a little insight into my notes around that. And then, now, critical analysis of something. So a little insight into my notes around that.
Or location of radio rooms. Comms 面对客户制造管理系统 Customer Oriented Manufacturing Management System Equipment Retrofit Gas compression work close to control room production over safety. Supervisors are not allowed to make decisions. Supervisor on the side had to call
Accidental.
was in the office in the airboarding. Shut down emergency procedure centered on one person, the rig manager. Unclear decision making progress. Radio room was damaged. No one used the public address system. No indication given. No indication given on how to abandon the rig. No organized attempts to lead the man to safety.
Deluge.
Fire deluge system failed start. Tartan and Claymore. Rigs continue to pump, feed the fire.
And then, now, what I want to do now is just take a couple of minutes and do what I call an online quiz. Now, this is an unassessed thing. I want you to fire up your minutes. Whitney, what about their role in all of this? So if we just start analysing and being critical analysis of something. So there's a little insight into my notes around that. And then, now, what I want to do now, what their management system practices are, how could that have happened? I want you to start thinking about it in terms of these things. Who made the engine, Pratt and Whitney? What about their role in all of this? So if we just start analysing and being critical analysis of something. So there's a little insight into my notes around that. And these things. Who made the engine, Pratt and Whitney? What about their role in all of this? So if we just start analysing and being critical analysis of something. So there's a little insight into my notes around that. And then, now, what I want to do now is just take a couple of minutes and do what I call an online quiz. Now, this is an unassessed thing. I want you to fire up your phones or whatever it is you want to use. And I want you to go to engineering workshop materials like this. Oh, you should have Wi-Fi. You've got Unify. Well, okay. So, for those of you who can get on the Wi-Fi, appreciate that that's a challenge. Try and find, just go to week 1, engineering content, week 1. And you should be able to see something that's called Workshop 1, Quiz 2. Can you see that? Could you just do it? It takes you 30 seconds. What it does is it tells me whether you've got a couple of points, and it tells me who's here. It's attendance, it's largely for attendance. You might try it in a different part of the room because lots of other people, you might come and sit over here. Yeah, I think you're in a blind spot over there.
没有，我等会儿自己弄去。操。
Okay, so has everybody found where the quiz is? And this will happen, okay, it's under, if I go back to engineering content in the unit, it's under week 1. And then you scroll down to engineering workshop materials, we're in the workshop, and then it says week 1 workshop quiz, face-to-face students. And it, as I said, it's 2 multiple choice questions, really simple. I just want to kind of see, I can see immediately whether you've got the right answer. It kind of says, well, I've made the point. Have I made the point clearly enough to you or not? It's a bit of a check on how I'm doing. But it's also, for me, a way of, through the semester, I do quite a lot of studies on education. I'm really interested in how engineers learn. And one of the things I've been doing for a long time now is trying to understand if coming to workshops and participating makes any difference to your performance. So knowing who's here and knowing who's watching this later in bed and not doing that kind of engagement is that this data is really useful for me to try and see that actually if what you're doing now at this moment makes a difference to how you do later on. With the caveat that I think you learn a lot more than we assess in the quizzes. do they? Okay. If there's a problem with the quiz today, somebody said there's a problem with the late tag, I'll try and troubleshoot it. It doesn't matter so much. Okay. Right. Okay, look, don't stress. If you can't do the quiz because you're not on the Wi-Fi, it's not the end of the world. Hopefully you'll be here next week, and I get a running list of who's here regularly anyway. And as I said, they're just 2 quiz questions. It's not the end of the world. I don't want you to worry about it. But it is nice to me if you can do it and try and do it in a meaningful way. Okay. So for those of you who can't get on Wi-Fi, stop stressing, put it away, pay attention. We're back to class. Okay.
他妈的什么意思？我操！
So, how do we, you've seen this, shocking, I think it's shocking, you've seen this shocking series of events. They indicate significant problems in the way engineering decisions were made, in the way activities were conducted, and in the decision making of those 4 people who involved. Let's face it, many of whom did not go home that night. Okay, so it's a really important thing to recognize that many people died in that accident. And for those people chatting at this moment in time, it's probably completely inappropriate. For those of you who are interested, you might consider watching the Deepwater movie. So this was a dramatization not very long ago of the Deepwater Horizon BP Congo disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. And this didn't happen very long ago. So I know Piper Alpha was more than 25 years ago. It seems remote. How could things must have moved on. The world has really changed. So if you are of that view, go watch the Deepwater Horizon. I think it's on Netflix. It's a dramatization. It's got a couple of big stars in it. Somebody help me out here. Yeah, Mark Wahlberg, great. And what's her name's daughter? Anyway, a couple of big Hollywood stars in it. And the oil and gas industry here, my colleagues in the oil and gas industry say it's a very decent recreation of the environment on a rig. And although it's Hollywood, it's a reasonable representation of the sequence of events. They went through a lot of trouble with that. So, just go and have a look at that. And wonder how far we've come. So how do we assure ourselves? How do we address those problems? How do you, starting out in your engineering career, how do you be part of the solution and not part of the perpetuation of the problem? There are no easy answers here. I don't have any easy answers for you. but this is something that you need to grapple with as you move forward. Obviously, one of the things we do in engineering, we do really well, is we try and put process in place. We try and make sure that there is appropriate process that, when complied with, will mean that these sorts of events cannot occur. So we have a lot of things to learn here, but there are also some really nice, simple models that we use and we use repeatedly. One of those models is called the hierarchy of controls. And this is just a way of thinking about what controls do I have in place. Once I've identified the risk, I've assessed the risk, and this is part of the risk management process that I shall beat into you through the next 12 weeks. I said 31,000, trusting risk management process, which hopefully over the next week you will have managed to get on the system and download a copy for yourself. But the most important part of that whole process is the controls themselves and that they are in place, the rest of the paper exercise. So at the lowest level is your PPE. You know, am I wearing a hard hat? Do I need a hard hat? Do I need safe gloves? Do I need safe shoes? Do I need a face mask? That's a level of control, but it's fairly rudimentary. It's important. The next one, the one most beloved of engineers, is administrative control. So by that I mean procedures. If I write a procedure, email it, everybody will do it. I can tell you, if you don't know that already, that doesn't happen. But administrative controls, procedures, standards, those are a huge part of what we spend a lot of time making, reviewing, and implementing. Then there are engineering controls. And engineering controls is things like safety guards. I'm going to make sure that somebody can't put their hand on that coupling spinning at 1500 RPM because I'm going to put a metal guard over it. I'm going to design and build and install something physical. Though it actually increasingly could be software. So it's physical, it's tangible in the sense it could represent code or it could represent some form of physical barrier, but that will mean that that person could not do that because I had some control in place. Then we move to the things that we would like to be doing more of, but are more costly and difficult. Substitution. Can I substitute, instead of this activity that is incurring the risk, could I do something else? Could I do something else instead? And then the final one is elimination. Do I have to do that job at all? Maybe I just take the person away. So an example of that is, very hazardous to have people around heavy mobile equipment, have people driving, dealing with, if you've got 300-ton haul packs, and you've got a lot of them, and you've got a lot of drivers, and you've got shift change, and you've got people driving small vehicles to deliver people for shift change. All of that creates a whole bunch of exposures and a whole bunch of risks. Well, if you have autonomous trucks and you have nobody around, you have eliminated the being done. That's an example of elimination. So I want you to remember this triangle. You can also start to think about it a little bit in terms of things that you're doing, particularly if you're involved in design projects or if you're involved in clubs and things like that, where risk assessment is an important part of what you do. Then start thinking about this. Is it enough just to tell everybody to wear gloves, or is there something more important, something higher up the hierarchy of controls that we should put in place? So higher up is obviously better. So we're not going, or is there? Something more important, something higher up the hierarchy of controls that we should put in place. So higher up is obviously better. So we're not going to look at part 3 of the Piper Alpha video. It's not that long. I really encourage you to have a look at it afterwards. It's sobering, it rounds out the story, and it's a really good thing to understand. I appreciate that it's challenging emotionally to watch something like this. But nevertheless, it is a historical fact and it's an important part of engineering DNA. So just to round back to what we talked about right at the beginning, which was, you know, what happens in real life, the practice of what actually happens is what we're talking about. But we're trying to understand the why in terms of these three parts of the system, the organizational capital part, the people part, and the social part. And it's really interesting to start to break things down and use that as a framework. And when you're doing a new project, if you're designing something, you also need to think about these three things. Because ultimately, you as an engineer are designing and building something for others to use. You need to think about your user. That makes you front and
Organizational capital. Organizational capital.
I want to just spend a couple of minutes. So what I'm going to do now, it's not 11 o'clock, by the way, it's 10 o'clock, is I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just trying to get some feedback from you around a couple of things, and just as much to understand who's in the audience and what sort of experience they got. Then we'll talk about lessons learned, and then those people who want to leave can leave. And then I've got a short thing about how to be successful in this unit. So those people who are kind of interested in some advice or some understanding about the unit and how to be successful, I've got a short presentation which I can do. You don't have to say that. Okay, so how many of you have ever been involved in any sort of industrial type of event where there's been a failure of a piece of equipment? Okay, just maybe mention it. Okay. Yeah, will you be learning a lot? Right. Okay, did you say something? Right. Yeah, and you see, isn't that interesting? You know, in a startup, it's like something breaks and then you learn and you move forward. You know, I think there can be a real different attitude in that environment. You can learn from failure, or you can just let the failure happen again and again. And I think one of the things that's celebrated about startup culture is this ability to learn from failure. And one of the things in older, more established organizations is it seems almost impossible to learn from failure. Yeah. That's great. Did you have something? Was he electrocuted? Yeah. So that, for those of you who are in the back and can't hear what was just said, somebody, a gentleman down the front works for a large, very large grain company. Yeah, and agriculture is often seen as kind of the poor, even the poor cousin of mining. Things are very agricultural and they break a lot. So he was making that point. The gentleman next to him works for a startup and says we break things a lot, but it's great. That's what we're meant to do. So we're trying to do something new, and it doesn't necessarily work the first time. So, but the attitude, and my comment was the attitude to failures is often quite different. And remind me again what you said. Oh, the electrical. And then we had a really interesting case with a high voltage accident where an electrical a guy went face to face or something on the bus bars, which is that's a very scary thing. Yeah, the gentleman in the blue. Right. Great. And after the, so what this gentleman was saying, just paraphrases, a gas explosion, dust explosion, which are really scary things. And you're doing the incident investigation? Okay. So looked at the controls and why they didn't work. Yeah.
Why didn't work? So
okay. So that's really, I mean, it is very interesting when you get to see that whole, you had the accident. As an engineer, these things are quite useful to be involved in because you get to see what was the controls in place, why didn't they work, and what should we do in future, which I think so that's a fantastic experience. Yeah, great. Anybody else? Oh, okay.
very work with big one, especially time when supervisors help these people.
Oh,
Make
yeah.
sure that no one
The regular spending.
but there was a serious problem.
So yeah, for the civil engineers in the room, particularly for the mining engineers, we're going to talk about tailings dam failures in a later week. So waste dump failures, high wall failures, geotechnical failures. Anybody watching news about the failures in Italy, the geotechnical failures, it's a really hot, and then of course you're wondering where are the people? It's horrific. Sorry, down there. Wow. Wow. Okay, so as much for the microphone for these people who aren't here, again, involved in a wall failure working for a mining contractor. You know, it's these things must be very real to you. Hopefully the things I'm talking about make sense in context of these experiences. You were involved in that? The mitigation. Wow. Yeah. So this is great. It's not great you've been connected to these failures, but it's great from a learning perspective that you've been connected to these failures. Because, you know, in a class like this, many of you will have not been connected to these failures, and I hope it makes it more salient to you that you have people your own age, similar backgrounds in class with you that have been directly connected to these things. I hope it makes it real to you that these things do happen and can happen. And maybe if you get a chance, I know that maybe you could take that step of going and talking to somebody you don't already know and say, gosh, I was really interested in that. Could you tell me more? And you could learn a little bit about what they've seen, because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build not just your individual experiences, but we're trying to build a culture, a learning culture that says that you're keen to understand. You recognize you don't want to have these experiences, but you can learn from the experiences of others. But you need to reach out to the people that have had those experiences and ask them about it. And so at least, and I'm sure there's many more in the room, and hopefully through this class as it goes, you will have the opportunity to talk to people you haven't talked to and learn a bit about their experiences and their reflection on it. So I've got two more slides.
Nothing learned.
One is just, and I always do this, so be prepared. I always do this at the end of class. I usually pick somebody who hasn't said anything to work out who you are, and say what. If you went home today and your partner, the younger brother, sister, parent said, oh, you did that class on risk liability and safety today. What did you learn? What did you say? One sentence. Somebody who hasn't said something before. Oh, have you said something? You said. What did you learn? Great. What different factors can contribute? A range, maybe a wider range than you first thought. That's great. Okay. Oh, the gentleman in the fluoro shirt at the back. What did you learn today? You'll never wear a fluoro shirt again. Okay. Did anybody learn anything else? A major lesson. Guy in the red t-shirt. Okay. Yeah, and so that's a really interesting point. You ask anybody nowadays, and they will say, repeat after me, safety is the most important thing. And it's like a mantra. And of course it is. But in practice, that's a very difficult thing to encounter in the competitive practices of staging life. And yeah. Okay, any other lessons? Lady in the anything? If there's one message that you, something you'll, it's not so much what you learn about, but what did you learn about the disasters can happen. That's great. Okay, that's great. So again, I think it's important you spent 2 hours and 10 minutes with me this morning. If you have walked out of here and you have not learned anything, I have completely failed. Okay?
Sorry, you failed. Critical thinking, what you learn. Actual knowing what to do and be capable of doing it. Actual, critical, actual, factual. Knowing what has happened, actively investigate the horizontal factors to identify the latent issues. Latent, okay. Potential finding out and knowing what to expect. Mindful. Be mindful of and the emerging hazard and challenge to existing hazard. Okay.
Latent.
So my final slide is something that in my years of training engineers, and I am a practicing engineer, I'm still practicing. I have a fellowship from BHP, which is a mining company, for those that don't know. For the last 5 years, and in fact just been renewed. And I'm in the BHP building every Tuesday, and sometimes I go to site and stuff like that. So I'm very close to what's happening in the real world, as you might call it. And I'm very passionate about engineers and newly graduated engineers and your opportunity to do things now that will impact on the jobs you get, the way you do those jobs as you first step into the workforce. And I didn't make this slide up. I borrowed it from somewhere, or I adapted it from somewhere. But I think for me, I have some things that I would encourage you to do. To be curious and be critical. Don't be passively accepting of information. In my experience, it's almost always wrong. So, and you need to be able to query data. You need to be able to ask questions. You need to be critical. But when it comes to doing something, it comes to executing a process, doing a calculation, using an algorithm, being competent. Know what you're doing. So understand the assumptions. Do it mindfully. Know what you're doing. Factual. Get the facts. Find out what happened. Talk to people. There is never find out what a fact, find out what are opinions, but find out what's going on. Ask questions. And then be open-minded. Recognize that what happened before may not happen again. Things can be slightly different, like the butterfly effect. Slightly different initial conditions, and the model will do something completely different. That is the real world. So don't be aware that, not fixed that there's only one thing out there, that A will lead to B, but actually increasingly A will lead to B and C. So be critical, know what to do, be competent, get facts, and be aware. It would be my request to you as you move forward. So are there any, that's my lot for this week. Are there any questions? Next week, we get really into the routine of the pre-work. So you should be getting on onto the week 2 thing. I would suggest you look this afternoon, and there are some instructions. There is some pre-work in the blue. So there are a series of short videos for you to watch, the slightly longer one here, and then there is the quiz. The engineering quiz. That, as I said, it's just to encourage you. Because if I said do the pre-work, you'd know to do it. So I had to give you a quiz to do the pre-work. What I found over the years. To do the quiz, to do the pre-work. The quiz is just there to check, to assure yourself that you've understood it. And then we're going to come to the workshop and do the workshop. And there are some slides and things. And it's kind of a fun workshop. It's about good things to happen. Go ahead. No, there's no quiz. That's right. It's the first quiz. And there isn't a quiz, there's a quiz every week until week 9 and 10, and then there's no quiz. Also, the other thing to remember is that I don't do all of these workshops. I'll get to in a minute. I have a whole series of really fantastic industry people to come in and do workshops in the middle of the semester as well. Sorry. It's on the pre-work. So my idea is you do the pre-work, and then you do the quiz. You can do it twice because I want you to learn. If I could give no marks for anything, I would, because I'm actually not worried. I just want you to have looked and understood the material. But unfortunately, I have 50 marks because that's the way assessment works. But the main thing is I want you to be able to come so that when we do this Google car trial exercise next week, you have a really good understanding of the words and the language and the ideas that I'm using in that trial. Is there anything else before people start moving? If you want to stay, I've got another 10 minutes or so, but those who want to leave now, welcome to leave. And I'll see you next week.
I'm a quick look at the iOS stuff because I did see a couple of things in the library and I wasn't sure.
I don't think it's in the library.
Like online, in the library.
Yeah. Hello. No problem. Hello.
Quick question. Do you do any work or do you know of the company DMV?
Yes, I work very closely with DMV.
Oh, okay, cool.
How do you know?
My dad works with them.
Okay, I do work with the Norway. I work with the Norway, not with Australia.
Yeah, like most people I go to, like very bad work, but you work so
Yeah,
well, gas company.
I know DMV really well.
Like what's that like? It's like verification.
Yeah. And so I work with Bureau Veritas and Lloyd and DMV. Yeah. So go on and tell me what you learned today. That'd be so cool. Okay. Next week. No. Okay. Right. Clear out. Everybody clear out. We need to go. Right. Here we go. In a marked sense, but the people that are able. Okay. So this won't take long. It's going to be just a quick thing. Some of it I talked about in the recording, but I have found that the people that do well in this unit, and not just do well in a marked sense, but the people that are able to leverage things in this unit into things like interviews. I've had several people who've done interviews with majors come back and tell me, boy, in that scenario, I used X, I used this process, or I used this thing that we practiced in the case study, and it really helped me with my interview, and I've just got, back work with Chevron or something like that. So that I'm not all about marks here. I think the marks will reflect a lot about how you've done, but I recognise that I have a much bigger picture here about the value of the unit than just marks. It's really about, your ability to do as an engineer and your ability to leverage what we're learning now into your engineering practice and give people who are hiring you a sense of the fact that you have the right mentality for this. You have an engineering mindset. It is a really important thing. I don't think we teach that so much through the engineering course. We teach how to do calculations, but we don't necessarily develop an engineering practice mindset. So embrace complexity. There will be many arguments on the discussion board. They're great to have about, wow, that's not 100% correct, but you said answer A is A, and my answer is always, it's more correct than the other answer. And that drives people nuts. Okay, but it's true. So some things are not absolutely correct in failures and in real life engineering, but they are more correct than the other answers. So you have to get to grips with the fact that if you've gone through the process and that's the most correct answer, that is the answer you need to use. You need to understand that we're using a variety of things here, and that decision making is complex and it's open to discussion, and I embrace that discussion. And I don't feel personally challenged if you come back and say I don't agree. In fact, I want to see those things. I'm up for it. I'm not the absolute authority on a lot of this stuff. All I can do is explain from my years of practice why I think that process led to that. But I think getting you to think that you don't agree with that, I just said be curious. I can hardly say, well, don't ask any questions. Don't ask those questions. That would be wrong. But I would also encourage you to engage in the conversation, not just with me on the other end of the discussion board, but with each other. Some of the really fabulous conversations we've had on the discussion boards over the years in this part of the course have been between students. And that's fantastic. I mean, if I wake up and I see there's 10 posts and there's 2 people arguing about something, I just think that I have done a good job somewhere. So please discuss. It's not. Yeah, I don't want people just looking at the answer and going, I don't understand how they got that, but that's the answer. All I need to do is memorize that. I don't want you to do. Okay. You need to practice. What we're trying to do in these case studies is get you to think about what you would say, not to passively sit there and watch the lecture online and go, oh, okay, those are the answers. That's what management. Those are the design factors. Those are the management system factors. Oh yeah, of course. If I'd thought those, I'd have done that by myself. But if you've never done it by yourself, you will not do it. So really, everybody who participated this morning is fantastic. That's exactly what we want. Thank you so much. So participation is a real key to success in this unit. And I'm talking about success not just in the I got a good score, but I learned something and I can use that in my day-to-day role as an engineer going forward. It influences me how I think. There is something else. Oops. I did change this. Okay. I've tried to design the unit so that the way you approach risk is built into how you approach the course. So the decisions you make about what you do are your decisions. And hopefully they have considered the risks involved. So there are a large number of voluntary things in this course. In fact, up until this semester, the midterm quiz has been voluntary. And I have really reluctantly moved it to an assessed unit. Because for me, there was something that said, given the opportunity to do a quiz in the midterm, that is a real test of your ability to manage risk. You either do it, you study for it, and you learn something, and you do the quiz, or you just go, don't worry about it, I'll deal with that, I'll deal with the midterm thing. So it was a real opportunity for people to say, how important is this to me, how important is the learning, will I do the midterm quiz? But nevertheless, unfortunately, well, I took the advice of a whole bunch of the system health club students to make it, so you can thank them to make this a mandatory thing this time. But there are a whole bunch of voluntary things. So, you don't have to come to the engineering workshop, you can lie in bed in the morning and then just watch it on double speed on Friday afternoon. That's entirely the same with stats practice classes. You can ignore the discussion boards or not. You can do this baseline stats quiz. I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you how many of you did it. 90% of you will not have done that. But you were given the opportunity to do it. And the decision not to do it is a decision about, and there are risk consequences involved with that. I can't tell you how many, I can't do it anymore with this current system, but we used to be on a system called Blackboard. And in Blackboard, I could get into the back end of the system and see absolutely everything everybody has done. Sadly, and you'll be very pleased to hear, no, I can't do that in Moodle. But I could see everything they'd opened, how often they'd opened it, when they'd opened it. I had this fantastic data set for like a few semesters. And I could really see that the people that, and I've got a paper out on this, that actually looked at what the people that did better in the final assessment, significantly different behaviors in terms of what they did on the discussion boards, where I knew how many times they looked at them and posted, and all of those things, all the voluntary things. The people that did the voluntary things, statistically different cohort than the people who didn't, and they behaved accordingly. So it was a really interesting exercise. We do the split learning part. I think I've covered a lot of this in the pre-work, so hopefully you've got an understanding. Do be organized. This is a lot of work in the first few semesters, a lot of new ideas. Don't expect all of them to fit and sit nicely. So please recognize that I've really front-loaded this, and that the second half of the term you'll be really grateful, but you will be cursing at the beginning of the term, I do everyone. these are some of the things this is just an old email. I get emails like this all the time, and they're wonderful. I'll let you read it for a minute. I'd like that to be the same for all of you. I really would. That's kind of my goal. I want you to be able to transition into the workforce. You're not going to be fully practicing engineers. Maybe have a working on knowledge of the concepts, familiar with the terms. You actually realize that underpinning all of those things, SILS, RCA, familiars, failure modes, hazards, those are all manifestations of one thing, which is this. All of those perfectly map onto the ISO 31000 management standard. And once you understand this, then you can apply it to all of these other more specialist three-letter acronyms that are in here. So I really hope we do that together. So I would say, do the practice classes and do all of that stuff. What I wanted to also show you is, this is what I was talking about with performance. So what I did is I had a whole bunch of people this access to 101. So I divided
Woo! 5% of the people gonna fail. I hope that won't be me. Oh my god. Cindy.
So what I did is I had a whole bunch of people this access to 101. So I divided the I could watch what everybody was doing online and in class, and I knew what the final scores were. So quartile 4 are people who got, between 72 and 90, 65 to 71, all that range. And you can start to see that obviously people's base grade going in is obviously a factor. If you have a weighted average of 52 going into the unit, you're the division of 4x1, but suddenly going in this one. Obviously, how you've done other units is going to be kind of replicated how you do here. But look at the participation scores. The average percentage of pre-work opened at least once was almost double than the people who were in the top performing quartile than the people that were in the bottom performing quartile. That the number of posts that people made was 6 times greater between the top quartile and the bottom quartile. That issue of making a casting question, and then the number of posts viewed, 241, almost double. So those ways of engaging into a posting question, I know it's really challenging to post a question, but I would ask you, just go ahead and do it. The world will not fall down. And we are there to help answer those questions. I'd much rather you post it than not. If you really think it's the dumbest question in the world, and you're super embarrassed to post it, you can use the anonymous post. We're all professionals here. And so don't make that be your default. try and, I like to be able to say, oh, thanks game, or whatever. I really hate saying dear and on. I'm just dealing with somebody, we're professionals here. This is, I'm not frightened to ask questions. As anybody in the system health lab will tell you, I ask way too many, and many of them are not. Maybe think I should know that, so asking more. So I want you to feel that that's a really important thing that you can be doing. Anyway, I don't take if anybody's interested, but I think the data, just to prove, I do actually have some data to support some of the things I'm saying. So I just want to take a couple of minutes in case you had any questions before we wrap up for the day. No, it's been on 2.5 hours. Don't normally go this long. Any questions before Betsy? Have a fast question? And if not, post them on the discussion board. Thanks for being a great class. Bye.
Testimony. Testimony. Woven.
Personal safety over process safety. Fire water pumps. Fire water pumps are manual. How to protect divers. 消防水泵手动启动。
complacent, evacuation,
这种傻狗，我他妈真他妈屌丝行为！人家问他不说，他问人家就得让人家说。
condensate,
妈的什么东西！我操他妈的真他妈费劲！ 是啊，嗯，我已经看了2个小时了。哎呀，我的那个统计的一个老师也是他妈很低，哎呦，我听的我他妈炸裂了，听不太懂，但我感觉他人好像还行。那我们分开选，没有没有。什么叫我们分开选？啥意思？
那比如说这道题我们都不确定，你选 A，我选 B，然后看答案，答案不对，我们两个都不对的话，就从C 和 D 里面选呀。
你说这个我们提交完一次的话，它会出答案吗？你他妈不想说答案，不想鸡巴跟我说，你就不说，那你自己去。真他妈傻逼！
这对错没有答案，但是你如果选了 A，答案是对的话，那是对的；如果你选 A 不是对的，它会显示不对的呀。
哦，完了就是说再提交一次的时候，还是原来的题就行了。就是说我们做对的几率就更大了。你他妈怎么提交个错了？傻逼！ as compression.球弄弄的工作是个质地。没事。冷凝泵。Overhead。盲法兰 blind flange。居期
Custodian.
custodian。由于柴油和电动泵驱动。由柴油和电动泵驱动。supply power。supply power。就是这个，这个就是 A 和 B。 我操你妈了！赶紧这种垃圾人真他妈恶心。知道。输送天然气。 妈哪那个这种垃圾他妈哪教的？